We are live, my friends. So good evening and welcome, whiskey lovers. It is Saturday, March 28th, 7:30, like we said we were going to start 2020. You are part of the inaugural streaming of the Alberta Scotch Society and Friends Whiskey Book Club. I'm Dolph. I'm the president of the Alberta Scotch Society, nicely known as AS, A period, A, S period, S period. And today is the first of our planned 7 Whiskey Book Club meetings focusing on this book. This book being Canadian Whiskey, the New Portable Expert by Mr. Davin Kergommeaux, who is, as we have it, with us tonight on the screen. And he's waving to us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it doesn't know how to wave, though.
What we are going to do now is just a quick roundtable of our 3 guests. We're going to have a 4th guest join us anytime. The Whiskey Dive isn't here quite yet, but he will be. So we're going to start with Davin, our man of the hour, the man of honor.
Well, thanks very much for having me, Dolph. And this is the inaugural meeting of the book club, so it's quite an honor. Just a little bit of, first of all, I'm drinking Masterson's 10-year-old rye. It's a great whiskey. You know that it's made in Alberta and 100% rye grain from Alberta distillers. I've been writing about whiskey for well over 2 decades now. Started with Scotch, and about 12 years ago started writing about Canadian whiskey. So we're looking at my Canadian whiskey book. I should tell you, before we get into this, I have a new book coming. It'll be out on Tuesday of next week, the 31st of March. It's the Definitive Guide to Canadian Distilleries. I'd really love it if people had picked that up. We're suffering through hard times right now, and a lot of the bookstores are closed, but you can still pick it up from the online seller. So this talks about 200 distilleries from coast to coast. Actually, there are 253 distilleries altogether from coast to coast. It's a travel book planning your distillery visits in Canada. But back to Canadian whiskey. Yes, it's really fascinating, and it really flies under the radar. People don't understand, how much we're doing up here with whiskey, and how different our whiskey is than others. That it really is its own style, even though until 2010 it was the very best-selling whiskey style in North America. So, anyways, I'm Davin. We're going to talk about my book, and hopefully by the end of this, I'll have figured out how to wave without making my hands too big. Take care.
It's the opposite hand, right? If we're doing right, it goes on the left side. Over to you, Nick.
I'm Nicole with Whiskey Bells, and I'm drinking Crown Royal Bourbon Mash tonight.
Excellent. And over to Yukon Dave.
Hi, guys. It's Dave from Yukon Brewing here. And today I'm going to be, I'll be using my Ass glass to sample some Two Brewers Peated. And I've been working for the brewery for 20 years. So I've got 12 years worth of whiskey experience.
I bet you have a bit more than that, Dave.
No, I hated my dad's crappy Scotch that he had when we used to steal it from home.
So you're new to the whiskey game.
12 years.
12 years. That's pretty good. And back to me. And, well, I've got 2 drams. So I've got this one. So Weiser's 150. And it looks pretty good. And my second dram, because I couldn't choose between them, and I knew Dave, my buddy, was on here, and I worked for Dave pouring for him one time, and this is what I got paid in, because I don't take money from friends, but I do take whiskey. So this has gone down quite a bit. So it's one of those 2 that I'll be tasting, or both. We'll be doing this later on. What did we say? The next hour after this, we might be on doing a more relaxed style, hopefully. We'll see how many of our friends show up. So let's change the view. I'm having a little bit of fun doing this back and forth. We can see our friends, and we're still waiting for the Whiskey Dive to show up. We chose this book, and I should get into that right away. We chose this book for 4 reasons. First, 5 of the 6 of us that we're going to be here tonight, 4 of the 5 that should be on, are Canadian, and we feel really patriotic doing this book. Just about every one of us already had the book. That's the second reason. Third reason is Davin is his next book is widely distributed next week, so it gives Davin a chance to talk about this, his next book, and I'm going to ask him in a second the link between the two books. And the fourth reason, maybe most importantly, is many of us, everyone in here right now, has a really good collection of Canadian whiskey. And like me, we're all waiting to crack open more bottles, but just to get to know them better on kind of a more intimate level. And this book is going to help us do that. So I'm going to start this off, and this is not a usual thing I'm going to do. This is not an intellectual pursuit half an hour, but I will start this with a quote. And from that quote, we're going to go on. So let's try this. This book tells the story of Canadian whiskey by taking the reader inside the bottle, the distillery, the warehouse, and the marketplace. It tells the story as it is revealed in early documents and as it is recalled in the memories of people who have lived many decades of Canadian whiskey history. It presents insights gleaned through discussions and visits with people who make Canadian whiskey at each of Canada's 8 traditional whiskey distilleries, and now more than 40 micro distilleries. It is not intended to be an official record to set things straight. However, it does challenge many dearly held beliefs. That I like that part a lot. And things for certain, though. In the marketplace, the most important ingredient in whiskey is not the water, nor is it the grain. No, the most important ingredient is the story. And I'm going to add to that, it's the people we get to share it with. Hence our panel tonight, and hence why we're doing this live, so we can get as many people doing this with us and sharing the comments as possible. So, Davin, I'm going to shoot it back to you for a second, if you could. Tell us, here, I'm going to click on you. Could you tell us the genesis of this book, why you did it in the first place, and kind of link it to your second book coming out next week? What's the common ground, aside from being Canadian whiskey, the common ground bringing us from one to the next?
Well, I started out with single malt Scotch, and I used to think, Scotch was the only thing, and really of Scotch, single malt was the only thing worth drinking. But, I live in Canada. I would drive by distilleries, and I got curious, and I started investigating them, learned more about them, and started visiting them and was compiling binders with information about them. And my daughter said, Dad, you're writing a book. So I did. And, since that book came out, I really have had very little time for anything other than Canadian whiskey. I still love bourbon, and I still love Scotch and Irish whiskey and Japanese and so on. But really, I'm really focused on Canadian whiskey. So I wrote this book, and it was really quite an effort. It was about 7 years of research, and then it's 6 months of really hard writing a chapter a week, trying to get it ready to meet a publishing deadline. Okay. And that book came out. The first edition came out in 2012, and then we had this micro distillery explosion, and all kinds of things changed. There was new science and things like that. So the edition that we're reviewing tonight was released published in 2017. It's still pretty much up to date. So really, it was. I kind of fell into writing a book about Canadian whiskey because there just wasn't one out there that could, to answer the questions that I had. And how does it link to the second book? Well, working for Whiskey Magazine, I was working on this adventure series with Blair Phillips. So we were traveling across Canada, visiting all these distilleries. And, I think we've had more misadventures than we did adventures. And I think it happened in Gander, Newfoundland. We'd been visiting Rodriguez Distillery. It's gone now. It doesn't exist anymore. But that was in 2014 we did that. And we walked into a bar, and it said, no motorcycle club colors or something like that on the door. It was kind of strange. And then we looked outside, and the Outlaws club post was right across the street. So we quickly downed our drinks and beat it. And thought maybe people needed some guidance so they wouldn't get themselves in trouble. Didn't need a stunt double to, do their distillery tours. Anyways, it just kind of grew from that, and we just visited most of the distilleries that are in the book. We did visit, not always together, one of us or the other of us, and it came together. What was really cool is that we had a January 1st deadline to get it done, and by the time I think there were 130 distilleries when we started writing the book, and there were about twice that many when we finished. So we had to just add more chapters and add more pages, and the book got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it's really been quite an experience. The industry grew as we grew. So, but there are more than 70 distilleries making whiskey in Canada now, and we got some really great ones. In fact, that Two Brewers is a pretty awesome distillery.
It is too.
Whiskeys are quite mature when they release them, and so it's been quite an interesting experience, just following my nose, to put this
Which is the way to do it in the whiskey biz, is it not?
Seems to be.
All right.
And everything happens at the last minute.
Well, you're a last minute kind of guy too. Yukon Dave is as well.
Whiskey is the last minute guy.
He's a last minute guy. So let's go on to questions, and whoever wants to field this, go right on ahead. The book is part history, part science, part traditional whiskey book where we have the tasting notes and then we have the insider information, which I like a lot. What did you like most and why, my friends? Who's going first?
Well, I always like the how we got here, how we got where we are today story. Right now I'm reading a book about Labatt's and how they were working together with the bootleggers on the hard alcohol, getting stuff into Detroit and that. And that's really interesting, like where they started and where they are today. I just find that really interesting.
And I'm on that history part as well, because listening to Davin and the Whiskey Dive and I as well, when we were in Banff, saw his master class, and it felt like a university class again, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. The other really innocuous thing I really liked in here, just small thing that someone might not have seen, when you saw the whiskey notes or the tasting notes, let's say Masterson, at the bottom, just the codes that they used. So if you look at page 6 and you see Whistle Pig at the bottom, you would see AD, and that would tell you it was from Alberta Distiller. So it made me feel like I was getting kind of inside information. And on some, well, Whistle Pig, you think, what? And I didn't know this until the master distiller passed away last year. Davin, do you remember his name?
Dave Pickerel?
That's it.
Yeah.
So I bought a bottle then, and I didn't previously because Whistle Pig's a little bit expensive for a rye, but that's okay. People like it a lot, and we hear great things about it all the time. But when he passed away, and I found out, and I think it was from, I don't know if it was from you on a Twitter handle, but someone on the Twitterverse was saying that it was mostly Alberta whiskey. So I did a little bit of investigation, and Alberta distillers. So that's really something kind of neat that's in the background. The Whiskey Dive had Pendleton as well, and you said undisclosed on that one. Do you have an idea where they source their whiskey, or do you know and you're not allowed to say?
Most of these distilleries, they make when somebody buys whiskey from them, they make them sign a non-disclosure agreement because they're afraid if someone buys whiskey and then screws it up, they don't want to get a bad reputation for their distillery. It's usually the distillery that demands non-disclosure, not the bottler. And I have my strong suspicions of where some of the Pendleton whiskey comes from, but you can never be sure. And
Right.
I think it would be a mistake to speculate publicly.
Here.
It would be just as easy to be wrong, or they could switch distilleries, So, and it might not all come from the same distillery. So, all I know is that I really enjoy some of the Pendleton whiskeys. Well, I enjoy all the Pendleton whiskeys, and wherever they get it, that's cool with me.
I could say that about just about any whiskey. I can find something to like about most whiskeys. And Nick and I have talked about this many times. Different whiskeys, different things. I personally love the single barrel cask strength whiskeys. That's my favorite, my forte. Nick Whiskey Bell's been trying to get me into blends a little bit more. and where her passion might be at that point. But we can find something lovely in just about every dram, I think. Next question. Any facts that surprise you that you think is important for people to know that maybe you knew, but they didn't know, or something in that line? And Nick, I'm going to go to you on this one. Click.
The discussion around wheat middling. So it's that leftover byproduct and how it's actually used outside of the whiskey process. It goes into making pasta, it goes into making sommelier. So it's just a really neat. Oh, by the way, we're using whole product here, and we're being really conscious about what we're doing. And I think that's even the start of this team on how they do their distillation, how they're preserving their energy, how they're trying to give back and be as friendly as possible and respectful as possible of the product that they're using.
Excellent. And Dave, did you have a favorite part, or am I going to me?
Well, I can't hear anything that Nick says. But one of the most interesting things I found early on was how much water it actually takes, how much liquid it takes to actually make a barrel of whiskey.
I agree. And that was right towards the end, I think. Yeah. 10 liters for 1 liter of distillate. And Davin, was it 60 liters that you needed for
steam,
heating, the cooling, and the cleaning? For
heating, cooling, cleaning. Yes, it's amazing how much water they go through. It really is. And I mean, a lot of them recycle the heat, so they might use some of that water over again. But it's phenomenal how much water goes into the whiskey. And there's an interesting thing about water, because you need a certain amount of water in the barrel to get the proper maturation. So even after they distill the whiskey to a high alcohol content, a high ABV, they'll then add water back. So there's enough in there to kind of mediate some of the oxidation and some of the reactions that turn the ethanol into a more interesting flavor. So it's critical.
So I got a good story. For that one. We start with 10,000 liters of wash, and by the time we're done, by the time we've deproofed it a little bit, we end up with anywhere from 7 to 8 barrels starting with 10,000 liters. We get 1,400 to 1,600 liters of product ready to age in the barrels. So yeah, there's a lot of water.
And running on to the next question. And this book's got lots of classy historical vintage photos. Are there any photos in this book, in the first section, I should say, that stood out for you, that you liked a lot? Nick, I'm going to you.
I liked this. And it's an advertisement photograph that's included. And it just speaks to how the whiskey was put out to the general public. And it's cool to see the marketing behind it. Marketing attracts us to a lot of the bottles that we try or we're curious about, and seeing some of the old marketing, it's interesting to see where it's come from.
Excellent. And I'm going to put mine in here. I don't know if we could see it. So that's on page 2. And not that the photo kind of grabbed me as much as what it said underneath. And it just made me feel really patriotic, which is everything that's going on tonight's kind of making me feel a little bit patriotic. So from grain to glass, Canada's 8 traditional distilleries turn hundreds of thousands of tons of Canadian grain into tens of millions of bottles of whiskey every year, making whiskey one of Canada's major agricultural products. And I like this, and it just means I am supporting Canadians throughout this great country with everything I bought. How's that sound? All righty. Did you have a favorite picture or one that kind of drew you throughout the book? Anywhere there, Davin?
Oh, I picked all the pictures, so I went through thousands to get the few that made it into the book. But I do like that chicken cock picture that Cole pointed out, because that was a really cool whiskey. The chicken cock whiskey has been reintroduced in the States. It's a different manufacturer. It's the only thing that's the same as the name. But that whiskey was made during Prohibition in Canada. and it was put in a flat bottle, and then the bottle was put inside a can so that it wouldn't break when they were, shipping it, or however they smuggled it, across the border or whatever. And it's really kind of a relic of prohibition. And I got that bottle, just a photograph. I got that from an old distiller from Seagram's. And I mean that was a Seagram's whiskey that was imported into the or exported to the States. And he had this old bottle had been hanging around forever, and you had to open the top first, like you open a can of sardines or something like that, then pull the bottle out, then open the bottle. So that was pretty cool. I was glad that I was able to photograph that and get it into the book.
That's pretty cool. I haven't seen anything like that. So back on here, what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is our whiskeys. We'll talk about what's in our glasses, just a little tasting note, a little background information, because that's what this is about too, enjoying our lovely whiskeys. So Davin, the man of the hour, we're going to start off with you.
Well, I'm drinking Masterson's 10-year-old rye. It's a wonderful whiskey. I talked to maybe more than I should have in the beginning, but it's 100% rye. And the folks at Masterson's, it's a California company, but they bought the whiskey in Alberta as mature whiskey. And these guys are winemakers, and they selected the casks that they want. They have blended casks together the way they wanted. They use their own process for bringing it down to bottling strength, which is 45%. And it's just got the luxury of the rye whiskeys that you get from Alberta distillers. It just has the it's kind of like the sour notes there and a little bit of bitterness, but more of it is sweetness and cloves and brown sugar and things like this. And it's really a spicy whiskey and very beautifully put together. It's a whiskey that I really enjoy. So it's Masterson's 10-year-old rye.
Perfect. Nico, Dave, let's do you.
Sure. All right. So what I've got in my glass today is our Two Brewers number 19, which is a peated whiskey, and it just arrived at my house on Friday. So I think I'm the only one that's tried it here. Well, other than yeah, we had some appear here magically a few weeks back. So again, number 19, this is our biggest peat to date. 77% of the mash, 77% of the liquid in the bottle, I do have the bottle here, is from our peat stock. Every year we make 100% peat stock. So we start off with 10,000 liters, end up with 7 or 8 barrels. The peated malt comes from Scotland. And so the rest of this 23% is our standard mash. So it's basically a pale malt mash.
Okay.
And it's I get a hint of a mint when I was a kid, a little square white mint that didn't really taste like anything, but it had a little bit of mintiness to it. And I get that kind of in the back. Kind of a fun thing.
Yep.
The peat's not really noticeable for 77% of the liquid being from our peat stock. Talking to Al, our distiller, he was a little bit surprised on how this kind of balanced out. We were expecting maybe a little more peat on the nose, but it didn't happen to come that way. But it's got a nice little peat on the finish, very well balanced. Get a really maltiness to it, a sweet maltiness that we tend to get all the time for some reason with all of our Two Brewers. You get the a little bit of oak, and you get the real nice peat finish. So it's kind of a fun one. I'll be experimenting with it here because I got nowhere else to go.
Excellent.
For the next little while.
You have a bottle of that one ready for me since I poured some of that at your last tasting?
What's that?
Am I getting some of that, Dave? Because you're supposed to pay me for my last tasting I poured for you, buddy.
Well, what I told you was you could have anything you want.
Okay. It might be that or the rye. One of the two.
It's up to you. I got bottles of each.
Thanks, bud. All right, Nick, you're up.
Well, I'm doing the Crown Royal Bourbon Mash.
Excellent.
And Crown Royal, we all saw growing up, and we've all sort of turned our nose up at it. We develop our palate, but it's cool coming back to it. And the bourbon mash, I enjoy it. I'm surprised by it, but I do enjoy it. It's got that corn nose. It's sweet. It's toffee. As you start to let it hit your palate, it goes to cherries and split. On the end, there's a light hint of mint, which is really cool. And for Crown Royal, I'm impressed with the depth of it.
Excellent. Let's go on to me. And back up. Having fun with this. On UNC, if we can get this back on here. The JP Weisers. So 150 commemorative series, 43.4%. And this was kind of neat because it commemorated on this side right here. You can see it right there. It commemorates each week, 7,827 weeks in all, from July 1st, 1867 to July 1st, 2017. I told you we're feeling nostalgic and very patriotic today. So that's my theme of the day. It's a blend of corn, it's a blend of rye, and it's in new oak as well as used Canadian oak. Right there from Windsor, Ontario, here in Walker. This 2017, it's roughly 17-year-old whiskey, something different in there possibly. On the nose, you smell a lot of corn. So the soft, sweet alcohol that you get with corn and maybe caramel. I smell, well, some sweetness there, and I'm thinking it's caramel. Rye spice, of course, and I think vanilla. When I taste it, though, it's creamy, it's oily, like I like the mouthfeel of corn, which I have to have at the same time. The sweetness I get first, and then the spices come and finish it off. So the finish is, because the sweetness is medium long. No, let's say medium. Let's go medium. But you're left with the sweetness, the spice, but still the feel in the mouth, which is quite nice. So I'm really enjoying this. I'll talk about my Two Brewers 17 in our after party, but this is what we know. So I'm enjoying that. Let's go to the random questions again. Let's go to the next one. It's a funny question. What's your favorite grain? I don't know if I can answer that. Corn, rye, barley, wheat. Actually, I can answer it, but I'd like to know if someone else has a favorite one out there. Nick? No?
Same. What's my favorite whiskey? It depends on the day and what I feel like.
All right. That's a good answer. How about you, Dave? You are most there, so.
We're an all malt brewery, so I like a whole bunch of different malts. I'm enjoying some rye. Don't know a lot about corn, so I can't say anything until I get a little more education on corn.
Okay. And Davin, let's go you. Do you have a favorite?
Well, depends how it's distilled. You know, if you look at Alberta Premium, which has almost no rye character, and then look at Masterson's, which has a lot of rye character, it all happens in the still. I really like a blend that has corn and rye together in it. When those grains have been distilled to emphasize their flavor characteristics and matured to emphasize their flavor characteristics. So it's hard to say, but I think I'm with Nicole. I like blended whiskey a lot.
Good. And let's do another question if we can. We're coming to the end of it. We said we were going to do this for a half an hour, so we're going to.
Holy crow, that went by fast.
It went by really fast. Our after party will take our time. But I do have a question for you. Actually, two questions. So, Davin, first one, the pictures of the bottles, the tasting notes on the different pages. Mm-hmm. Do you have a rhyme and reason to which ones you put where? So the Mastersons with the whistle pig underneath it, why do you put that where you did as opposed to where you put Two Brewers type thing?
Well, I put the Mastersons there because there's a barley whiskey, a wheat whiskey, and a corn whiskey, and that's the section about grain. And then whistle pig kind of fits in because it comes from the same distillery. Yeah. Generally, I tried to put the tasting notes matching the distillery I was talking about, or the region I was talking about, whatever, so that there was some correspondence between the chapter and what whiskeys were in that section. But of course, there were a whole bunch of whiskeys left over, which I then just put into chapters that didn't really have a focus on a specific distillery or region. Okay. So there is some logic to it. But that one was specifically because I had three, like an all barley whiskey, an all wheat whiskey, and an all rye whiskey for Masterson's, and so I put those three together, and that's why I did that.
Perfect.
And,
yeah. Well, I thought so. But we want to hear it. Now, I'm going to read you a quote, and it's really cool. So this is on page 18. You said, in 1974, the requirements that Canadian whiskey be aged for 2 years was increased to 3 years, and it was specified that aging must take place in small wood. And it just took me by surprise because small wood meant less than 700 liters. So one, I wanted to know who is distilling in barrels that are larger than 700 liters. What would constitute big wood as opposed to small wood?
Well, whiskey hasn't always been matured only in barrels. Some people were maturing it in large copper vats, big copper cylinders, or even stainless steel. Yep. Some people were maturing it in like the equivalent of a fermenter or a mash tun. These huge, big vessels. Right. And so what they're essentially trying to say there is, you got to use barrels. Now, barrels really are around 200.
Usually.
Liters. But so essentially what they're saying there is you can't just put it all in some great big massive tank, wait 3 years, and it's suddenly whiskey. It has to go through this process that promotes maturation, in a vessel that breathes.
Thank you for that, Davin. And I'm going to give you the last 1 minute, 2 minutes on the show before we click out. And at this point, I'm going to say thank you to everyone. Thank you for our 3 members on the side and the 2 that were waiting in the background that we're going to get on at our next segment. So we're going to go off the air for probably about 5 minutes, and then we'll do our Talking Dead whiskey style extravaganza with the rest of us, where we can open up and have a couple extra different drams with us and pull out some different things and ask the questions maybe didn't want to ask about online with this half an hour one. So after the discussion, please tune in. But let's give Davin his last 2 minutes. You're closing off our show, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Dolph, for having me, and thanks, Dave and Nicole. I really enjoyed it, and I see that Dawn's waiting for our Walking Dead session or Drinking Dead session. I really enjoyed being this. This is a great idea. You looked at my Canadian whiskey book, which I'll put up here, there, and I also told you I have this other book coming out in a couple of days. This one, I hope people will
hold it there for a second.
Pardon me?
Hold that book up for a second. Let's get a good look at it.
Okay, I didn't want to kind of steal the fire from the other from what we're really talking about here. Definitive Guide to Canadian Distilleries. That's coming next. But we'll be talking about this Canadian whiskey for the next few weeks, and I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks very much for having me, and thanks everybody for listening.
It was our pleasure today. Davin and Dave, thank you very much. And Nick, thank you very much. And for the 2 waiting backstage, thank you very much. Thanks for watching and giving us notes as we're doing our first, like I said, inaugural run. This was fantastic. I'm glad we did this. I'm glad Nick got behind it right away and kind of kickstarted it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a fantastic night.
Yes,
and we'll see everyone next week, 7:30, unless you're gonna listen to our Talking Dead style whiskey talk in about 5 minutes. It'll take me about that much time to get stuff ready. Well, see you all then.
All right. See ya.
Take care.